哎呀，特朗普又发疯了。美国说阿里巴巴
Oh no, Trump is at it again. The US claims that Alibaba helped our military target America. After that statement, Alibaba's stock plummeted. Wow, is this for real?
On November 1st, the White House issued a national security memorandum accusing Alibaba of providing technical support to the Chinese military for striking targets in the US. The memo revealed that Alibaba had granted the Chinese government a military access to customer data, including IP addresses, Wi-Fi information, payment records, and various AI-related services. It also noted that some Alibaba employees had transferred zero-day vulnerability knowledge to the Chinese military. This news, reported by the Financial Times and Reuters on November 14, sparked investor concerns over geopolitical and regulatory risk, causing Alibaba's Hong Kong-listed shares to drop by around 4% on that day. Alibaba denied the accusations, calling them completely false and malicious PR, but refused to comment on its connections with the Chinese military. Later on November 26, Bloomberg reported that U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense Stephen Feinberg, in a letter to the chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees on October 7th, stated that after reviewing the latest information, the Department of Defense had identified 8 entities as part of China's military-industrial complex and recommended adding them to the 1260H list. The 1260H list is an internal roster published by the U.S. Department of Defense that identifies Chinese military companies operating directly or indirectly in the United States. The 8 Chinese companies include Alibaba, along with tech giant Baidu, electric vehicle leader BYD, Yoptoplink Technology Optical Modules, Hua Hong Semiconductor, RoboSense Technology, LIDAR, Wuxi AppTech Biotech, and Zhongji InnoLight Silicon Optical Modules, among others. It is unclear whether these 8 companies have been added to the Pentagon's 1260H list yet. Representatives from all the named companies did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The 1260H list was first issued in 2021 and is updated annually. Over 130 entities accused of collaborating with the Chinese military are included, ranging from airlines and construction firms to shipping companies, computer hardware manufacturers, and telecommunications companies. According to Bloomberg, if Alibaba and other related companies are added to the 1260H list, it could pose a serious challenge, especially for Alibaba, as it intensifies its global AI competition. While this designation won't immediately lead to a ban, it could damage the company's reputation and send a clear warning to U.S. institutions and businesses. Doing business with these companies may carry risks. A report from Hogan and Lovells law firm pointed out that being placed on the 1260H list would have multiple direct and indirect effects, including restrictions on U.S. defense contracts, potential inclusions on other restricted lists, damage to reputation, and increased compliance costs. A Chinese vlogger believes that if BYD gets added to the 1260H list, it will never become a global car company. He says,
BYD will never make it as a global car brand now. Its cars won't be recognized globally either. What are the bosses doing? The US is already starting to limit them. The North American market is out of reach for BYD. They say BYD is a military-industrial company, a military civil fusion company, and it's facing restrictions from the US. What does that mean? It's like that tractor factory from before. Normally, it's civilian, but when war breaks out, it switches to making planes and cannons.
As a giant in the electric vehicle industry, BYD has long positioned itself as a private company. However, in 2019, reports revealed that this wasn't entirely true. Researchers found that BYD's top executives had close personal ties with the Chinese government, including the military, and the company had received substantial state subsidies and other support. Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AAM, said, "There is ample cause for concern that BYD is misrepresenting the already meager amount of domestic content in its buses. Researchers Nathan Pakasik and Emily Debla-Bure explained how BYD became a key part of China's Made in China 2025 and China Standards 2035 strategy. Their findings include BYD received billions of dollars in subsidies from the Chinese government, far more than it publicly admitted. BYD's leadership maintains direct personal ties with the government, including founder Wang Chuanfu, who has held multiple official positions in the Communist Party. BYD's independent director Wang Zhidong also serves as a research director at a military institute under the state-owned North Industries Group. In March 2019, BYD signed a comprehensive strategic cooperation agreement with the now-banned Huawei. BYD used its status as a private company to acquire foreign technology, data, and markets, then transfer that knowledge to state-owned enterprises and military companies. BYD's R&D centers are based in areas focused on technology transfer for military purposes. BYD's battery technology is a part of the Made in China 2025 plan and more. On January 2, 2025, the U.S. Department of Defense updated the 1260H list, adding 71 Chinese entities and removing 6, bringing the total number to 134. This update included several well-known companies like Tencent Holdings, CATL, SMIC, and Changxing Memory Technologies. This news triggered a stock market sell-off, with tech giants Tencent and battery leader CATL seeing their stock prices hit hard. Taiwan's National Defense and Security Research Institute researcher Shen Mingxi analyzed from a strategic competition standpoint, saying that U.S. sanctions on civilian companies closely linked to the Chinese military have dual implications. One, to prevent China from using these companies to acquire more U.S. technology through military-civil fusion, and two, to limit the development of these companies in relation to China's military-industrial complex. He noted the more companies that are banned, the more likely U.S. sanctions will have spillover or diffusion effects. Shen believes that with the current uncertainty in U.S.-China trade competition, these sanctions against Chinese companies are unlikely to stop unless the Trump administration decides that these companies' investments in the U.S. won't affect the country's technological capabilities or its industries. Xu Zhiyun, director of the Strategic and Resource Institute at Taiwan's National Defense and Security Research Institute, analyzed that if the Department of Defense's proposal is approved, the distinction between the free world supply chains and Beijing's red supply chain will become even clearer. Baidu, which might be added to the 1260H list, was also reported last year to have collaborated with the Chinese military. On January 12, 2024, the South China Morning Post quoted informed scientists saying that a research lab under the Chinese Communist Party's Strategic Support Force had used Baidu's Wenxing Yiyan and iFlyTech's Xinghuo models to train military AI systems, hoping to make military AI more humanized. After the news broke, Baidu's stock price dropped more than 10% on January 15th. Baidu responded by saying that the Wenxing model is an open online version and there was no collaboration or affiliation with the military research lab. Baidu claimed to be unaware of the research project. Xu Zhiyun pointed out that the fate of Alibaba, Baidu, and BYD is repeating Huawei's pattern. He said, on one hand, these three companies have funded the development of military technology for the PLA or accepted subsidies from the PLA. On the other hand, their technology is dual use, meaning it serves both military and civilian purposes, which is China's so-called military-civil fusion. Since Xi Jinping came to power, the CCP has emphasized its so-called military-civil fusion strategy, which involves sharing military-related technologies from the military, defense industries, and military enterprises into the civilian sector. At the same time, the CCP's military defense industries and military enterprises absorb advanced technologies from civilian companies, and civilian infrastructure, construction, and logistics can also be repurposed for military use. However, it's interesting that in the recent anti-corruption campaign within the CCP's military-industrial complex, two high-ranking officials in charge of military-civil fusion were implicated in corruption, including Jing Zhuanglong and Lei Fanpei. Additionally, many senior military-industrial officials have fallen from power in the past 2 years, which is seen as a sign that the CCP's military-industrial system might be vulnerable at critical moments. Shu Zhiyun said that the shift of Chinese civilian technology into military use has many hidden issues. The so-called military-civil fusion is extremely opaque, and leaders can use secrecy as an excuse for corruption. The conversion of commercial products to military use allows for high sky costs, and managers can manipulate the process for their benefit. Researchers Shen Mingxi explained that many Chinese private companies are either state-owned or linked to the military. Military-industrial enterprises use the name military-civil fusion to use these companies as intermediaries obtaining high-tech goods from abroad, which can be used for military weapon system development or manufacturing. Furthermore, through military-civil fusion, military enterprises can request subsidies or research funding from the central government and then export their products through civilian companies. In the past, the CCP brought in technology from the Soviet Union and bought weapons from Russia, then reverse engineered them, but more of their weapon systems and parts are obtained from Western countries through military-civil fusion using so-called civilian companies, he said. He believes the US is blacklisting these Chinese companies because it fears they could export equipment or technology to other countries, especially Russia, during the ongoing war in Ukraine. Su Zhiyun added that, in fact, many countries practice military-civil fusion to reduce the cost of defense equipment. For example, US defense equipment requires that 70% must be commercial, off-the-shelf products. The problem with China's approach, however, is that it uses military-civil fusion to steal technology secrets and military technology from other countries. On November 2nd, a major data leak occurred involving the private cybersecurity company Beijing Nonsec, which has close ties with the government. Over 12,000 confidential documents were leaked online. The documents reveal the full extent of the CCP's cyber weaponry, including various remote access Trojans, RATs, cross-platform malware architectures, internal attack manuals, and a global monitoring target list. The technical range covers operating systems like Linux, Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android, with particular concern over Android attack modules, as they can collect vast amounts of data from Chinese chat apps and the messaging platform Telegram. This shows that the CCP's long-running surveillance system is far beyond what the outside world has imagined. Wang Shouwen, an expert on the US-China tech war at Taiwan's National Defense Research Institute, stated that the CCP's hacking and surveillance actions are not simply technical issues but involve national security, diplomacy, economic competition, and information warfare on a virtual and physical integration battlefield. Under the CCP's military-civil fusion policy, there is no distinction between the military and civilian sectors. The CCP's United Front infiltration is persuasive and its hacker system is fully military in nature. She said, "There is no longer any difference between commercial, military, and national secrets. Any data stolen can have intelligence value in other contexts. Countries will have to unite to effectively counter the CCP's infiltration and attacks." Concerns over the security of Chinese tech products have intensified across multiple countries. Israel Ministry of Defense recently announced that due to data security concerns, it had suspended using Chinese electric vehicles, including BYD, to its military officers. Israel had previously purchased over 600 Chinese-branded vehicles, including MG, from SAIC and Sherry's to go. Dr. Haral Menashri, head of cyber at the Holon Institute of Technology, warned that Chinese-made smart devices should be viewed as complex mobile intelligence platforms that actively send information back to Beijing. In October this year, Norway discovered security vulnerabilities in some Chinese-made Yutong electric buses, which could potentially be controlled remotely. The US is expanding its restrictions on Chinese companies. In May, US lawmakers urged the Securities and Exchange Commission to delist 25 Chinese companies, including Alibaba, due to their links to the CCP military. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently said in an interview that everything related to the delisting of Chinese stocks is under consideration and that President Trump would make the final decision. Several international investment banks, including JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley, have expressed concerns over the delisting risk of Chinese stocks. Former U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo stated that Chinese electric vehicles are smartphones on wheels capable of being remotely controlled, disabled, or even used for mass surveillance. The US has imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles and has completely banned their sales. In addition to electric vehicles, the US has imposed bans or restrictions on Chinese companies like Huawei, DJI, and Hikvision. The U.S. Departments of Commerce, Defense, and Justice have started investigations into TP-Link, a Chinese router manufacturer that holds 65% of the U.S. market, suspecting it to be a channel for CCP cyber attacks and espionage activities. According to the National Defense Authorization Act passed in December 2023, from October 2027, the Department of Defense will no longer be allowed to procure batteries from 6 Chinese companies, including CATL and BYD. Xu Zhiyun stated that U.S. sanctions represent a major blow to the CCP's military-civil fusion efforts, but this is a consequence the CCP brought upon itself. Alibaba, Baidu, and BYD are all facing challenges in their operations. On the evening of November 25th, Alibaba released its financial report for the second quarter of 2026 fiscal year, ending September 30th, 2025. The company reported a net profit of 20.6 billion yuan, a 53% year-on-year decline, mainly due to a drop in operating profits. Excluding US GAAP, net profits was 10.35 billion yuan, down 72% year-on-year. Baidu's third quarter revenue was 31.2 billion yuan, a 7% year-on-year drop, marking the largest quarterly decline in its history. The company posted a net loss of 11.2 billion yuan. Online marketing revenue fell 90% year-on-year, totaling just 15.3 billion yuan. Although AI-related revenue grew by 50% to 10 billion yuan, accounting for a third of total revenue, this growth wasn't enough to offset the decline in its traditional business. Baidu recently launched its largest round of layoffs in years, affecting multiple business departments, with some teams seeing up to 40% of staff let go. Several insiders revealed that this adjustment was mainly due to the intensified competition in the AI sector and a decline in advertising revenue. Baidu has long bet on AI, but these investments have yet to drive recovery in its core advertising business, with market share being taken by platforms like Xiaohongshu and ByteDance Douyin. BYD is also facing declining sales and profits. In October, its sales dropped 12% year-on-year, marking the first month of year-on-year decline in 19 months. Previously, the company's profits for the third quarter had fallen by 33%. Due to design flaws and battery-related safety risks, BYD has recalled more than 210,000 vehicles this year, including nearly 7,000 plug-in hybrid SUVs. Chinese issues expert Yue Shan stated that Western sanctions will intensify the internal competition among China's high-tech companies, creating a vicious cycle. These grey rhinos will collide with the CCP's domestic demand market, further destabilizing the economic process. Economic instability in turn causes greater social impact.